Episode 1, The Night That Changed Everything. The full moon hung low over the forest, fat and luminous, casting silver light over the clearing. The music from the pack's annual moon festival drifted through the trees, fiddles, drums, laughter, the occasional howl from tipsy young wolves. It was supposed to be a celebration of unity, of the bond we shared as a people. For me, Violet Hart, it was just another reminder of where I didn't belong. I stood near the edge of the bonfire crowd, nursing a glass of bitter cider, my eyes flicking over the familiar faces, packmates who barely tolerated me, elders who looked through me like I was invisible. My parents had died when I was 16, and since then I'd been just another orphan the Alpha's charity had taken in. They gave me food, clothes, a bed in the communal house, but no one let me forget I was a nobody. I should have left early. I almost did. But then I saw him. Dane Blackwood. He moved through the crowd like he owned the air itself, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless authority that made others step aside without thinking. His dark hair was ruffled by the wind, his amber eyes glinting in the firelight. He was the Alpha, our Alpha, and every inch of him radiated power. And for reasons I couldn't name, those amber eyes found mine. It wasn't just a glance. It was a collision. The noise of the festival dimmed in my ears, my heart beat loud instead. He didn't smile, but something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe curiosity. He crossed the space between us without hurry, but every step seemed deliberate. "You're not dancing," he said, his voice low, rough in a way that seemed to vibrate through my ribs. "I don't dance," I replied, forcing my chin up. "Not with strangers." His mouth curved slightly. "You know my name. That doesn't make you less of a stranger." He studied me like I was a puzzle. "What's your name?" "Violet." "Violet," he repeated slowly, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. His gaze swept over me, not in a crude way, but with a weight that made my skin prickle. "You shouldn't be standing out here alone. I prefer it to being surrounded by people who don't want me there." Something unreadable passed through his eyes, and before I knew it, he'd taken the glass from my hand and set it on a nearby barrel. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. I should have said no. Every rational part of me screamed to walk away. But when his hand brushed mine, warm and strong, I felt something in my chest crack open. He led me away from the firelight, into the shadows of the forest. The music grew fainter until all I could hear was the crunch of snow beneath our boots and the rush of my own breathing. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice embarrassingly breathless. He didn't answer right away. Then he stopped, turning to face me. The moonlight lit the sharp planes of his face, the heat in his eyes. "You have no idea what you do to me, little wolf." The way he said it, low, dangerous, sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could speak, he stepped closer, his hand cupping my jaw. His thumb brushed over my lower lip, and I forgot how to breathe. "Dane." "Say my name again," he murmured. "Dane." Something snapped in him. He closed the distance, his mouth crashing onto mine in a kiss that was hot and claiming. My hands went to his shoulders, meaning to push him away, but instead I clutched at him as his tongue slid against mine, stealing any protest I might have made. He broke the kiss only to growl against my ear, "You belong to me. Remember that. If you try to run or hide, I will hunt you to the depths of hell." His hands were everywhere, pinning my wrists above my head with one hand, the other sliding down my side, pulling me flush against the hard length of his body. My knees went weak, heat pooling low in my belly. The world narrowed to the sound of his breathing, the press of his weight, the rough rasp of his voice as he kissed me again, deeper this time, until my head spun. I knew I should stop him. I knew this was dangerous, that being with him could only end badly. But under the pull of his scent, the warmth of his body, and the fierce hunger in his kiss, I forgot every reason to say no. The rest of the night blurred into heat and tangled limbs, the shock of skin against skin, the feeling of him moving inside me like we were made to fit. Every touch was a brand, every kiss a promise I didn't dare believe. When dawn came, the air in the cabin we'd stumbled into was cold, but the space beside me in the bed was colder. Dane was gone. On the table, there was no note. Only the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. And just like that, I knew, I'd been a mistake he intended to forget. Episode 2, The Rejection. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the silence. No heartbeat but my own, no deep, steady breathing beside me. The thin blanket tangled around my waist was cold, the wood stove in the corner dead hours ago. My hair was a messy halo around my face, my skin still tingling from where he'd touched me. I rolled to the side, expecting to see his broad shoulders, that lazy half-smile he'd worn just before pulling me under again in the dark. But the bed was empty. The small cabin, one of the unused hunting lodges near the northern ridge, was empty too. His jacket was gone from the chair. The boots that had been kicked beside the door were gone. It felt like the air had been punched out of me. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around me. My eyes landed on the table. No note. No trace but the faint scent of pine and something darker, his scent, lingering like a ghost. A cold weight settled in my stomach. It had been a mistake. Not just the night. Me. I dressed in silence, each movement slow, my body aching in ways I didn't want to think about too closely. The walk back to the pack house was long, the morning frost biting at my cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the sharpness in my chest. I told myself I could pretend it hadn't happened. No one needed to know. I could hold the memory in some secret corner, a bittersweet dream. That hope lasted exactly until I stepped through the main hall doors. The room went quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some curious, most sharp with something uglier. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. I caught fragments. Saw her leave with him last night. Alpha doesn't waste time. She thinks she's special now. My skin prickled under their stares. I kept walking, trying to get to the stairs, but then he was there. Dane. Standing in the center of the hall, flanked by two of his beta lieutenants, his face carved from ice. His amber eyes slid over me once, head to toe, then stopped, unreadable. Violet. His voice carried across the room, cool and distant. I froze. Alpha. Something flickered in his gaze, but it was gone before I could name it. He took a step closer, and the air between us seemed to tighten. Last night, he said evenly, was a lapse in judgment. On my part. The words were a blade, clean and precise. My throat went dry. A lapse? He didn't blink. It will not happen again. A murmur went through the watching pack. Heat flooded my face, not the good kind from last night, but a searing humiliation that made my hands shake. I forced a nod. Understood, Alpha. I tried to move past him, but his voice stopped me again. For the sake of the pack, and your own standing, I suggest you forget it happened. Completely. His gaze held mine for a fraction of a second longer, something unreadable in the depths, before he turned away to speak to one of his betas. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just rejection. The rest of the day blurred into a haze of stares and whispers. I stayed in my room until sunset, sitting on the narrow bed, staring at the wall. The ache in my chest had hardened into something colder. By nightfall, I'd made my decision. If the Alpha wanted me to disappear from his life, then I would. But not in the way he thought. I would leave the pack. Episode 3, The Escape. The pack house was quiet at night, but not silent. There was always someone awake, guards patrolling the perimeter, sentries posted near the gates. Wolves were light sleepers by nature, even the creak of a stair could raise suspicion. I'd been listening to those sounds for hours, sitting on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, my boots laced tight. The bag by my feet was small, just enough to carry a few changes of clothes, my worn leather journal, and a pouch of coins I'd saved from odd jobs. Everything else I owned could be left behind. It was strange how easy it was to walk away from a place that had never truly been home. The humiliation of this morning still burned under my skin. Every glance, every whisper, every smirk from the she-wolves who would have killed to be in my place last night, until they learned the alpha regretted it. Until they realized I was nothing but his mistake. He'd made that clear. So I'd make my absence just as clear. I waited until the clock in the hall struck 2. Then I slipped into the corridor, my steps silent on the wooden floorboards. The shadows were my allies tonight. I hugged them like a second skin as I made my way to the back exit. The cold night air hit my face, sharp and clean. I kept to the edge of the courtyard, moving between buildings until I reached the east gate. One guard, half asleep, leaning on his spear. I knew his patterns. He always stepped away for a quick smoke near the watchtower at this hour. When he turned his back, I slipped past, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my ears. The forest beyond was a dark ocean of trees, the ground crusted with frost. My breath came out in white clouds as I pushed forward, my boots crunching softly on the frozen earth. I didn't look back. Every step away from the pack lands felt lighter. Every mile put more distance between me and his cold amber eyes, his voice saying, "It will not happen again." But the further I went, the more a strange heaviness began to settle in my body. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. The adrenaline was wearing off, and I'd eaten almost nothing since yesterday. By dawn, my stomach was twisting in a different way, an uneasy flutter that wasn't just from lack of food. I stopped by a stream to drink, cupping the icy water in my hands, but the chill only made the nausea sharper. And then it hit me. The missed cycles. The changes I'd brushed off as stress. The way my senses had sharpened even more than usual in the past week. The memory of his touch, his scent, the way our bodies had fit together like something inevitable. I pressed a trembling hand to my stomach. No. It couldn't be. But deep down, I already knew. The forest around me felt suddenly different, less like a refuge, more like the beginning of a dangerous journey. Not just for me, but for the life I might now be carrying. I stood there for a long moment, the cold seeping into my bones, until a sound in the distance, a faint howl, snapped me back to reality. I wasn't safe yet. Tightening the straps of my bag, I turned east toward the human town beyond the mountains. My heart was pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the danger behind me. Because whatever came next, I would face it alone. Episode 4, Birth of a Secret. Winter had been cruel that year. The human town I'd fled to, Greyford, was nothing like the bustling cities I'd read about. It was small, remote, and the kind of place where outsiders were noticed instantly but quickly forgotten if they kept to themselves. I rented a cramped apartment above a bakery, its single window facing the cobblestone street. For months, I worked odd jobs, sweeping the bakery floor, helping at the laundry, anything to keep my head down and save enough for the baby. Because yes, there was no more pretending. By the second month, my body had made the truth impossible to ignore. I was carrying Dane Blackwood's child. And I would never let him know. The thought of facing him, of seeing the flicker of regret in his eyes, or worse, indifference, while holding our child, it was unbearable. This baby deserved better than being labeled a mistake before he even took his first breath. By the 7th month, every step was heavier, my back aching, my belly a firm curve beneath my coat. The baker's wife, Mrs. Hale, started leaving extra bread by my door. She never asked questions, but her eyes were kind in a way I hadn't felt in years. Then, on the first full moon of February, the pains began. It started as a dull ache low in my belly, then sharpened into something that stole my breath. I tried to pace the floor, to breathe through it, but each contraction was stronger, closer together. By the time I realized I couldn't do this alone, the streets were buried in snow, and help was too far away. I remember gripping the edge of the bed, my nails biting into the wood, sweat rolling down my face despite the freezing air. The room smelled of pine from the small fire in the stove, but beneath it was the raw, metallic scent of blood and birth. Hours blurred into a haze of pain, exhaustion, and the stubborn, primal will to bring this child into the world. And then, a cry. Thin at first, then stronger, filling the tiny room. I sank back against the pillows, tears streaming down my cheeks, as Mrs. Hale, who'd heard me from downstairs and rushed in, placed the small, wriggling bundle into my arms. A boy. His skin was warm and soft, his tiny fists curled tight, and when his eyes opened. Amber. Bright, unmistakable amber. My breath caught. Dane's eyes. For a moment, a storm of memories rose, his voice in the dark, the heat of his touch, the way he'd looked at me before everything shattered. But I forced them back. "This is Leo," I whispered, the name coming to me as if it had been waiting all along. Leo Hart. Not Blackwood. Never Blackwood. That night, as the snow fell thick and silent outside, I swore to him, and to myself, that no matter what, I would protect him. He would grow up free from the weight of the Alpha's world, from the cruelty of pack politics. Dane Blackwood would never know he had a son. Episode 5, Dane's Restless Heart. The problem with being Alpha wasn't the weight of the crown, it was the silence when you tried to sleep. I'd faced rogues at our borders, negotiated with rival packs, and kept the peace through winters so harsh even the elders whispered about omens. But when the halls were empty and the only sound was the wind against my window, the ghosts came. One ghost in particular. Violet Hart. It had been months since that night. Months since I'd touched her, tasted her, felt her heartbeat under mine. And yet, I remembered every damn detail. The way her eyes had flashed when she told me she didn't belong to me. The way her lips had felt, soft but defiant, before they parted for me anyway. The way her breath caught when I whispered I'd hunt her if she ran. And then she was gone. I told myself I'd done the right thing. That it had been a lapse in judgment. That the pack needed stability, and stability meant Emily. Emily, perfect, poised, bred for this role. My parents had approved the match years ago. Her lineage was impeccable, her father controlled one of the largest packs to the north. Our union would cement alliances, ensure the future of the Blood Moon territory. But the truth was uglier. I'd rejected Violet not because she wasn't fit to be Luna, but because she'd made me feel things I couldn't control. She'd made me want something more than duty, more than the neat little box my life was supposed to fit into. And wanting that was dangerous. I sat at my desk, the fire in the hearth throwing shadows across the map spread before me. Emily was due back from her trip tomorrow. The engagement announcement was set for the next full moon. And all I could think about was where Violet had gone. I'd had scouts keep an eye out, not an official order, but a quiet instruction to report any sightings of a lone she-wolf matching her description. Weeks passed. Nothing. It shouldn't matter. She was just one woman. There were hundreds of beautiful, strong she-wolves in the territory. But none of them had eyes like hers. There was a knock at the door. My beta, Marcus, stepped inside without waiting for permission. Alpha. Patrol reports are in. No rogue activity on the southern border. I nodded without looking up. And the north? Clear. Though, there was something else. He hesitated. One of the scouts says he saw a young woman passing through the Grayford area a few months back. Human town. Matched the description you gave me. My head snapped up. When? Late winter. She was alone. Grayford. Remote, quiet. Easy to disappear in. My pulse quickened before I forced it back down. Send someone discreet to check. No pack insignia, no uniforms. Marcus gave a sharp nod and left. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the flames. What would I even say to her if I found her? Apologize. Claim her. Demand she come back. The memory of her scent hit me, wildflowers and something warm, like sunlight on skin. I could almost hear her voice. You don't own me. The hell I didn't. I pushed the thought away, but it lodged there like a splinter. That night, I dreamed of her. We were in the forest again, the moonlight silver on her hair. She stood just out of reach, her lips curved in that infuriating almost smile. When I moved toward her, she turned. And there was a child standing beside her. A boy. No more than 3, with amber eyes that burned into me like a brand. I woke with a start, my chest tight, the sheets tangled around me. The fire had gone out, and the room was cold. But the image of that boy's eyes stayed with me long after the dream faded. Episode 6, A New Life for Violet. When I first arrived in Grayford, I told myself it was temporary. A place to catch my breath, to keep my head low until I figured out what came next. But then Leo happened. From the moment he was placed in my arms, my life stopped being about what I wanted and became about what he needed. A roof over his head. Food in his belly. Safety. Safety above all else. Grayford was far from the Blood Moon Pack's reach, tucked between the mountains and a river that froze solid every winter. The townsfolk didn't ask questions as long as you paid for your bread and didn't cause trouble. For the first time in years, I wasn't Violet, the Alpha's daughter, or Violet, the rogue who shamed her pack. I was just Violet Hart, the quiet woman who worked above the bakery and carried her baby wrapped tight against her chest. The bakery became our anchor. Mrs. Hale, the owner's wife, treated me like some half-feral cat she'd decided to feed. She'd slip extra loaves into my bag, press coins into my palm when I helped with deliveries, and never once asked about Leo's father. Leo was perfect. And trouble. By the time he could crawl, he'd figured out how to pull himself up on the chairs and get into the flour bin. His amber eyes, his father's eyes, followed me everywhere, curious and bright. He had my dark hair but the same strong jaw and stubborn tilt of the chin that had made me grit my teeth every time Dane Blackwood told me no. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, I'd catch myself staring at him and wonder what Dane would see if he looked at our son. Would he see himself? Would he feel pride? Or would he see only a mistake? I didn't want to know the answer. So I built a wall around our life. No visitors. No pack business. No talk of alphas or mates or the world I'd left behind. We lived in the rhythm of small-town life, mornings in the bakery, afternoons at the market, evenings by the fire in our little room. Winters were harsh, but the cold kept us inside, where I could watch him play with the wooden wolf figurine Mrs. Hale's husband had carved for him. Still, there were moments when my guard slipped. One spring afternoon, when Leo was nearly 2, we were at the market buying apples. A merchant glanced at Leo, then at me, and said, "Those eyes, rare to see that shade here. You folks from the northern packs." My breath hitched. No. We're from the coast. A lie, smooth from practice. But that night, I sat awake long after Leo fell asleep, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. The merchant's question had been innocent enough, but it was a reminder, eyes like his were hard to forget. If the wrong person saw him. I started changing our routines. Different market days. Different streets. No lingering in the square. I even dyed my hair a lighter brown to throw off anyone who might be looking for the girl I used to be. Leo didn't understand, of course. To him, Greyford was the whole world, safe and simple. I wanted it to stay that way. But as the years passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were living on borrowed time. Episode 7, The First Glimpse. Some things fade with time. Scars. Old grudges. Even the sharp edge of grief. But not her. Not Violet. It had been over 2 years since she'd vanished from Blood Moon territory, but I could still hear her voice when I closed my eyes. Still remember the defiance in her gaze, the way she tasted when she kissed me back, even as she swore she didn't belong to me. I'd tried to bury it under duty. Tried to let Emily's presence fill the space Violet had left. It didn't work. Emily was fine. She was exactly what the pack needed. Intelligent, disciplined, politically useful. We'd been engaged for a year now, though the wedding kept getting delayed, border disputes, trade negotiations, one crisis after another. Part of me was grateful. Every delay was one more month I didn't have to face a future where the bond in my chest still belonged to someone else. I was in the war room that night, reviewing reports, when Marcus stepped inside. He didn't usually knock, but this time he did. That got my attention. "Speak," I said. He closed the door behind him. "You told me to keep an ear out for anything unusual in the human towns near the northern ridge." I sat up straighter. "And?" He hesitated, which wasn't like him. "A trader from Greyford came through today. Said there's a young woman there, dark hair, about your height, living alone with a boy. Maybe 2, maybe 3 years old." The room seemed to shrink. "Go on." "The boy's got unusual eyes. Amber. Bright." My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. I leaned forward, my voice low. "What else did he say?" "Not much. The woman keeps to herself. Works at a bakery. Doesn't talk about the boy's father." The trader thought it was strange, that's all. Marcus's eyes met mine. Could be nothing. But we both knew it didn't sound like nothing. I turned toward the map on the wall, my gaze zeroing in on Greyford. Remote. Snowbound half the year. The perfect place for someone to disappear, if they wanted to be forgotten. If Violet had been pregnant when she left. I forced the thought back, but it wouldn't stay buried. It kept replaying in my head, tangled up with the image from that dream months ago, a boy with amber eyes, looking straight at me. "Send 2 men," I said finally. "Quiet ones. I want eyes on them before I go myself." Marcus nodded once. Understood. When he left, I sat there in the silence, staring at the flickering fire. If it was her, why hadn't she come back? Why keep my son from me, if he was mine? The answer was obvious. Because I'd given her every reason to. Episode 8, Footsteps in Greyford. Greyford had always been quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones. The steady clop of horses in the morning, the low murmur of voices at the market, the smell of bread drifting up from the bakery downstairs. Safe. Predictable. At least, it used to be. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was barely a flicker in the corner of my eye, a shadow that didn't belong to the movement of townsfolk, a figure gone the moment I turned. I told myself it was nothing. Just winter making me jumpy, the cold biting sharper than usual. But a few days later, it happened again. Leo and I were at the market, haggling over a bundle of carrots, when I felt it, the prickling at the back of my neck. The sense of being watched. Not in the idle way people glanced at a mother with a young child, but in a way that tracked me. Followed me. I turned my head just enough to scan the crowd. Nothing. Only merchants calling out prices, women gossiping by the well, children darting between stalls. Still, my stomach tightened. "Come on, Leo," I murmured, taking his small hand. We're going home. He looked up at me with those bright amber eyes, questioning, but didn't protest. He'd learned early that when my tone dropped low like that, it was time to listen. On the way back, I kept glancing over my shoulder. The streets behind us were empty, snow crunching under our boots the only sound. By the time we reached the bakery steps, my nerves were strung tight enough to snap. Mrs. Hale noticed immediately. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Fine," I lied, managing a smile. "Just cold." But that night, after Leo was asleep, I sat by the window with the lamp turned low. The snow outside reflected the moonlight in sharp, clean lines. And there, across the street, half hidden by the shadows of the old chapel, was a man. Standing still. Watching. The moment my eyes locked on him, he stepped back and disappeared into the alley. My heart slammed against my ribs. Whoever he was, he wasn't from Greyford. The townsfolk didn't linger outside in the dead of winter without reason, and they certainly didn't stand staring at a second-floor apartment for no damn reason at all. I thought about locking the shutters. I thought about packing a bag. But then I looked at Leo, curled in his blanket, his little chest rising and falling. He deserved stability. He deserved not to be yanked from place to place because his mother was running from ghosts. Still, that night, I slept with the kitchen knife under my pillow. Episode 9, The Report. I'd been pacing the length of my office for the better part of an hour before Marcus finally came in. One look at his face told me everything. He had something, and it wasn't trivial. "Close the door," I ordered. He did, quietly, then stepped forward. Our men returned from Greyford. I stopped pacing. And they found her. For a moment, the room tilted. My grip on the desk tightened, fingers digging into the wood. Describe. Lives above a bakery, just like the trader said. Dark hair, about her height. Keeps to herself. And, Marcus hesitated just long enough to make my pulse spike, she has a boy. 2, maybe 3 years old. My throat went dry. Eyes? Amber. I inhaled slowly, steadying my voice. "You're certain?" As certain as a man can be without walking up and asking. The thought of anyone approaching her without my say-so made my wolf bristle. The idea of another man looking at my son, because that's what he was, there was no question now, made something darker stir in my chest. I turned toward the map, my gaze locking on the small mark indicating Greyford's location. 2 years of silence. 2 years of not knowing. And all this time, she'd been here, raising my child without me. The urge to leave right now, to ride through the night and kick down her door, was almost overwhelming. But I forced myself to think. If she'd hidden from me this long, barging in would only make her bolt. "Did she see you?" I asked. Not directly. But, Marcus's mouth tightened. She might have sensed something. One of the men said she hurried home from the market the moment she noticed the crowd behind her. Later that night, she saw someone and went still as stone. So she was already on edge. Good instincts. It made me angrier. "Pull the men back for now," I said. "If she feels hunted, she'll run, and I'm not losing her again. I'll go myself when the time's right." Marcus nodded but didn't move to leave. "You want my opinion?" "Not particularly," I said flatly. He gave it anyway. "You've waited this long. Don't screw it up by letting your emotions drive you." I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I was already imagining what it would feel like to see her again. To see him. And I wasn't sure emotions wouldn't drive me straight into her arms, or pin her against the wall until she admitted why the hell she'd kept my son from me. Episode 10, Pressure Mounts. The days after that night felt wrong. Not in the obvious, there's a man standing outside my window, kind of wrong. It was quieter than that. Quieter, but heavier. The streets felt different. Grayford was never bustling, but there was always life, the chatter of neighbors, the lazy bark of the blacksmith's dog, the smell of bread from the bakery below drifting up to our apartment. Now, I found myself straining to hear those familiar noises, as if they'd been muted. The first sign something was off came 3 mornings later. I'd stepped outside to hang laundry on the line, Leo sitting nearby with his wooden wolf toy. A gust of wind pushed a scrap of paper along the ground, catching against the leg of the table. Absent-mindedly, I picked it up. It was nothing at first glance, just a torn corner of a map. But then I saw the ink smudge. Grayford. Circled. My hand went cold. I looked up sharply, scanning the alley between our building and the butcher's shop. Empty. But the stillness felt deliberate, like someone holding their breath just out of sight. I burned the paper in the stove before Mrs. Hale came up with her basket of bread. She asked if I was all right. I lied again. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself it was a coincidence. Maps got torn, paper blew around. No reason to panic. Then came the market. I'd been avoiding it since that night, but we needed supplies, flour, salt, some dried meat for the winter stores. I bundled Leo in his coat and scarf, made the walk, and kept my head down. Halfway through, I felt it again. That itch between my shoulder blades. This time, I didn't turn right away. I finished paying for the flour, thanked the merchant, and only then glanced across the square. A man stood by the well, pretending to check the straps on his packhorse. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a travel-stained cloak. His face was shadowed by the hood, but I saw enough, eyes that weren't looking at the horse at all. They were on me. I tightened my grip on Leo's hand. "Stay close," I murmured. He pressed into my side, sensing my tension even if he didn't understand it. We left the square through the side street, moving quickly but not running. Running would be a signal, predators always chased when you ran. By the time we reached home, my heartbeat was thundering in my ears. I double-locked the door and shoved the dresser against it, ignoring Mrs. Hale's curious glance when she knocked later to offer a fresh loaf. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the building made my wolf stir under my skin, restless and alert. And then, just before dawn, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving past our door, pausing just long enough for the floorboard outside to groan under the weight. I sat frozen in the chair by the window, the knife clutched in my hand. The footsteps moved on. When the sun finally rose, I was still in that chair, Leo curled in a blanket on the bed, blissfully unaware. I knew then that Grayford was no longer safe. But leaving meant risking the roads in winter, meant no job, no shelter, no plan. And it meant crossing open ground, where whoever was watching could move faster. So I stayed. For now. But every bone in my body told me the walls of this life were closing in. Episode 11, The Decision. Marcus didn't bother knocking this time. The door swung open, letting in a rush of cold air from the hall. "You should hear this," he said without preamble. I put down the report I'd been pretending to read. "Talk. Our contact in Grayford says she's rattled. The boy too, though he doesn't seem to understand why. She's been changing her routes, keeping to herself even more than before." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Why?" "There was an incident at the market. One of our men was in position, but she spotted him. Didn't make a scene, just took the boy and left. Later that night, a local saw her sitting up with a knife in hand, watching the window." My jaw tightened. She was already halfway to bolting. "She's smart," Marcus continued. "She'll wait until the roads are clear enough to travel, then she'll vanish again. And if she does, he didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need him to. We'd both been here before, me chasing shadows, her always one step ahead. I rose from my chair, crossing to the map on the wall. Greyford was marked in red now, a neat circle that had been mocking me for weeks. How many men are we running up there? 2. Both low profile. Pull them back. Marcus blinked. Pull them. Dane, if we take the eyes off her. She already feels hunted. More men will only make her run faster. I tapped the map, my finger pressing into the little circle like I could crush it through the parchment. If she's going to bolt, I'm the one who needs to be there when she does. Marcus's expression shifted. You're going yourself. I'm done watching from a distance, I said, my voice low, certain. 2 years I've let her think she could disappear. 2 years she's kept my son from me. That ends now. He hesitated, then nodded once. When do we leave? I leave tonight. That earned me a look. And if she runs before you get there? Then I'll run faster. Episode 12, Crossing Paths. The snow had finally stopped. For 3 days, the wind had howled against the walls of Greyford, piling drifts higher than the bakery windows. Roads were impassable, and even the market had been silent. When the sun returned, so did the people. I almost stayed inside that morning, instinct told me to, but the pantry was nearly empty, and Leo had eaten the last of the dried berries the night before. So I wrapped him in his thickest scarf, pulled on my own cloak, and we braved the streets. The market square was busier than I'd seen in weeks. Merchants had carts piled high with goods, neighbors calling greetings across the cobblestones. I let myself relax, just a little. Leo tugged at my hand, pointing toward a stall selling honey cakes. Mama, can we? He didn't finish the sentence. Because that's when I felt it. The air shifted, thickened. The chatter of the market dulled under the pounding in my ears. A scent, faint but undeniable, cut through the smells of bread and smoke. Pine. Musk. The sharp edge of a winter storm. My wolf went still inside me. I turned my head, slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter something, and there he was. Dane. Standing near the blacksmith stall, towering above the crowd, his cloak dusted with snow. His eyes, those molten amber eyes, were locked on me. 2 years hadn't dulled him. If anything, he looked harder, sharper, like the time apart had carved him into something even more dangerous. His gaze raked over me, then down to Leo. I saw the moment his body went rigid. The moment recognition struck. My breath caught. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to grab my son and vanish into the crowd. But my legs didn't obey. I could only stand there, heart hammering, while the space between us seemed to collapse. People moved through the market, oblivious, but for me there was only him. The tether between us, the one I thought I'd severed, pulled tight, burning through every defense I'd built. Leo's small hand squeezed mine. Mama, he whispered. That broke the spell. I tore my gaze away, bending to scoop Leo into my arms. Without looking back, I pushed into the crowd, weaving between stalls until the square was a blur of voices and color behind me. I didn't stop until we were back in the apartment, the door bolted, my back pressed to the wood. My chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. He was here. And he'd seen us. Episode 13, The Confrontation Begins. I'd told myself I was ready for this moment. That I could play it calm, deliberate. But the second I saw him, that plan disintegrated. It was the eyes. My eyes. Amber, bright, unflinching even as the boy clung to her hand. I knew before I even took a breath that he was mine. For a heartbeat, all I could do was stand there. 2 years of searching, of imagining what he might look like, and now he was right there. Then Violet looked at me. It hit like a punch to the chest, those same defiant eyes I remembered, framed by hair whipped loose in the winter wind. For a second, something flickered in her gaze. Recognition. Shock. And then, fear. She broke eye contact, scooped the boy into her arms, and turned away. I moved. The market was thick with bodies, but I didn't feel them. I pushed through merchants and customers, ignoring the curses, my focus locked on the glimpse of her dark cloak slipping between stalls. Violet. She didn't stop. I saw her dart past the baker's cart, the boy's arms wrapped tight around her neck. She was fast, weaving through the narrow spaces, using the crowd like a shield. I was faster. I cut down the side row, trying to intercept, but she was already halfway to the northern street. The smell of her, warm, wild, tinged with panic, was a trail my wolf was desperate to follow. For a moment, I thought I had her. She stumbled on a patch of ice, her grip tightening on the boy. But before I could close the gap, an old cart rolled between us, blocking the way. By the time I shoved it aside, she was gone. I reached the end of the street and scanned every direction. Nothing. Just snow swirling in the wind, footprints already filling in. My pulse was still pounding, the wolf inside me clawing to give chase. But I forced myself to breathe, to think. She hadn't left Greyford, not yet. Moving with a child in this weather would slow her down. She could hide for a few hours, maybe a day. But I'd just proven she couldn't outrun me forever. I'd seen her face. I'd seen my sons. And now that I'd found them, there was no universe in which I was letting them go. Episode 14, Behind Locked Doors. By the time I reached our apartment, my lungs burned from the cold air and the sprint through the streets. I slammed the door shut, turned the lock, and shoved the dresser against it. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the key. Leo peered up at me from my arms, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes wide and uncertain. "Mama, who was that man?" My throat tightened. I wanted to lie, to tell him it was no one, just a stranger in the crowd, but the truth was still lodged like a shard of glass behind my ribs. "No one you need to worry about," I whispered, setting him down. "Go to your room for a bit, love." He hesitated, then nodded, clutching his wooden wolf as he padded away. The moment his door closed, I sagged against the wall. My whole body felt wired, adrenaline still pounding through me. I'd seen him. Dane. It had been less than a minute in the market, but I knew that look. He'd recognized me. Worse, he'd recognized Leo. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to brace my hands on my knees. 2 years. I'd built a life out of scraps, kept us hidden, convinced myself that as long as we stayed quiet, far from the city, he'd never find us. And now here he was. I paced the length of the kitchen, mind racing. The instinct was clear: leave. Take Leo and run before Dane could track us. But it was the middle of winter, the roads were treacherous, the snow deep, and every in-between here and anywhere worth hiding would be full of travelers waiting for the thaw. Leaving now meant sleeping in barns, risking sickness, maybe worse. Staying meant giving him time to close in. I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to think past the panic. If I left at night, I could make it to the southern woods before dawn. From there, the smaller villages didn't ask questions. But would Leo be able to keep up? Could I carry him that far? A floorboard creaked in the hall outside. My head snapped up, breath catching. Silence followed, but the wrong kind. Not the comfortable hush of winter mornings, but something heavier, deliberate. I stepped toward the window and peered through the curtain. The street below was empty, but the shadows between the buildings were too deep, the kind that swallowed a man whole if he stood still enough. I let the curtain fall. We couldn't stay. Not for another day. Episode 15, The Net Tightens. Grayford was smaller than I'd imagined. 2 main streets, a handful of side lanes, and enough alleys to hide a dozen secrets. Perfect for a fox trying to vanish. Perfect for a wolf who knew how to hunt. I didn't put men on every corner, that would be sloppy. Visible pressure made prey bolt, and Violet was more dangerous when she was running. Instead, I placed 2 of my best trackers at the choke points, the northern road toward the mountains, and the southern lane that led into the woods. Both were easy to cover without drawing eyes. Marcus handled the rest, moving through town like a bored traveler, chatting with merchants, mapping every possible route she might take. "You're leaving gaps," he said that evening, leaning on the railing outside the inn we'd taken over. "If she's smart, she'll see them." "She's smart," I said. "And I want her to see them." Marcus studied me for a beat, then his mouth curved. "You're baiting her." "She thinks she can outmaneuver me," I replied. "So I'll give her just enough rope to try." The snow was falling again, soft and steady, coating the rooftops in white. From where I stood, I could see the faint glow of the bakery windows 2 streets over. That's where she was. I didn't need to knock on the door to know, her scent drifted even through the cold, faint but distinct. I could have gone there tonight. Ended it. But she'd barricade herself, fight like hell, and in front of the boy, no. Not yet. Instead, I'd let the circle tighten. I'd make her feel the walls closing in, every day just a little smaller, every step outside just a little more dangerous. Eventually, she'd decide to move, probably at night, thinking she'd spotted a weakness in my net. And that's when I'd be waiting. Marcus broke into my thoughts. "You're playing a long game for a man who's been looking 2 years." I kept my eyes on the bakery. "This isn't about finding her anymore," I said. "It's about making sure she never leaves again." Episode 16, A Whispered Warning. The snow had turned to a thin, miserable drizzle by morning, soaking through the edges of my cloak as I walked. I hated being out here, but there were things we'd need if we were going to leave: food that wouldn't spoil, an extra blanket, a bit of lamp oil for the nights in between safe roofs. I'd packed most of what we had last night, but it wasn't enough. The market was quieter today, the weather keeping most people inside. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. I kept my hood low, scanning every face I passed. Most were familiar: Mrs. Hale's nephew hauling sacks of grain, the tanner arguing with a farmer over a hide. But there were others. Men I didn't know. Too still. Too watchful. I avoided them, heading for the back row of stalls where the cloth seller kept scraps she sold cheap. If I cut and stitched them right, they'd make wraps to protect Leo's feet from frostbite. I was choosing a piece of heavy wool when someone brushed past me. I stepped back automatically, ready to apologize, but the man didn't stop. He moved on like any other customer, head down, cloak dripping from the rain. Except he spoke as he passed. "Don't take the south road." It was so soft I almost thought I'd imagined it. I turned, heart kicking hard against my ribs, but he was already gone, swallowed by the slow-moving crowd. My hands were trembling as I paid for the cloth. I shoved it into my satchel, mind racing. Who was he? How did he know? The south road had been my plan. It led through the woods, far from the main patrol routes. I'd studied the maps, walked the edge of the tree line more than once. It was the safest way out, or so I'd thought. If he was warning me, it meant someone was watching that road. If he was lying, it meant someone wanted to steer me somewhere else. Either way, my escape plan had just collapsed. When I reached home, Leo was sitting at the table, carving a stick with his little knife. He looked up and smiled, but my own smile felt like glass about to crack. We were running out of time. And now, I wasn't even sure which way to run. Episode 17, Closing the Trap. Marcus slid into the chair opposite me, brushing rain off his shoulders. She's rattled, he said without preamble. Changed her routine this morning. I didn't look up from the map spread across the table. How? She went to the market. Same as before, but tense. Kept her head down, avoided my men. And here's the interesting part, she bought heavier cloth. Looks like something you'd use for travel, not for sitting by the fire. I allowed myself a slow exhale. She's preparing to leave. Here's the better part. Marcus leaned forward, tapping the southern road on the map. She was set on this route before. Our watchers were ready. But after this morning, she's avoiding it completely. My mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. She got a warning. He blinked. From who? That, I said, finally looking at him, is the part one don't care about. Whoever it was, they did me a favor. Marcus frowned. How? Because now she'll take the east road. I tapped the thin line that wound toward the low hills, a longer route, less direct, but it narrowed into a single pass before the next village. And guess who controls that pass? Realization dawned in his eyes. You're going to drive her straight into it. I sat back, the wolf in me already tasting the endgame. No need to chase her through every alley in Greyford. I'll make her believe she's outsmarted me. That she's slipping through while my men watch the wrong road. And when she hits the pass, she'll have nowhere to go. Marcus studied me for a long moment. You really think she'll walk into it? She's running with a child, I said. That means she'll choose the safest looking route. And that, I pointed to the pass, looks safe enough for someone desperate. I rolled up the map and stood. Start pulling back on the south road. Make it obvious. Let her see the gaps. And the pass. Already covered. All we have to do is wait. As Marcus left to carry out the orders, I turned toward the rain-streaked window. Somewhere out there, Violet was packing. Telling herself she'd make it out. She didn't know yet that I'd already closed the last door behind her. Episode 18, The Last Night in Greyford. The room felt smaller than ever that night. Not because of the walls, but because of the weight pressing in from all sides, the kind you can't see, but you can feel in your bones. Everything we owned worth carrying was stacked neatly by the door, a satchel with dried meat, hard bread, and a small pouch of coins, a rolled blanket, the heavier wool I'd bought that morning, my knife, sharpened until it gleamed in the candlelight. I'd left out only what we needed for the night, 2 cups, the kettle, Leo's wooden wolf. He was curled up on his cot, legs tucked under the blanket, his hair sticking out in every direction. I sat beside him, tucking the edge around his shoulders. Tomorrow we're going to take a trip, I told him softly. His eyes lit up. To see the big forest? Maybe. I forced a smile. We'll walk for a while, and then we'll find a nice place to stay. Just you and me. He frowned, the way only a child can when they know something isn't quite right. Are we running away again? I froze, just for a second. Why would you say that? Because you always pack food like this when we run, he said simply, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And your face looks the same as last time. I smoothed his hair, swallowing the knot in my throat. We're just going somewhere safer. He considered that, then nodded and snuggled deeper into the blanket. When his breathing evened out, I stood and moved to the table, unrolling the scrap of map I'd kept hidden. The south road was out, whoever had warned me was right, I could feel it. The east road was tempting, but too open. If Dane was in Greyford, he'd know about it. Which left, the river path. It wasn't on most maps because it wasn't a road, just a narrow track along the frozen bank. Dangerous, yes, but in this weather, almost no one used it. If we could keep our footing and follow it to the old ferry crossing, we might slip past any watchers. It would add hours to the journey. It would mean walking in the dark before dawn. But it might be the one route Dane hadn't thought of. I folded the map and slipped it into my satchel. Tomorrow, before the sun rose, we'd be gone. And if the gods were kind, he wouldn't find us until it was too late. Episode 19, Into the Snow. The knock came before dawn. I was already awake, sitting at the desk with the map spread out in front of me, when Marcus stepped in, his breath steaming in the cold air. "She's gone," he said. I looked up slowly. "Which road?" He hesitated, never a good sign. "Not the east." My jaw tightened. "Then where?" "That's the problem. She didn't take any of them. Watchers at the north and east never saw her. The southern point says the same. She just vanished." I stood, pushing the chair back hard enough to scrape against the floor. "She didn't vanish. She's on foot, with a child. That means she's slow, and she's leaving tracks." We were out the door within minutes, the snow under our boots crunching in the silence of a town still asleep. I followed Marcus through the narrow lanes until we reached the edge of the river quarter. That's where I saw them, two sets of footprints, one small, one larger, leading away from the last row of houses. They didn't head toward the main road. Instead, they curved down a narrow slope toward the riverbank. The river path. Marcus frowned. "No one uses it this time of year. Ice is too thin in places. That's why she chose it." I crouched, brushing snow from the edge of the tracks. They were fresh, less than an hour old. The wolf in me surged forward, hungry for the chase. She tried to outthink me, to slip past while I watched the obvious routes. Clever. Too clever. Marcus shifted uneasily. "If she keeps to the bank, she'll be at the old ferry crossing by midday. After that, she could cut north into the woods. Then we catch her before midday." I straightened, my blood already singing with the hunt. We set off along the river, the icy wind biting at my face. Every so often, I caught the faintest trace of her scent, wild and warm beneath the sharp cold. The tracks veered close to the water, then back inland, as if she was testing the ice. She was careful. She was fast. But she was still mine. And this time, there would be no more running. Episode 20, Cracks in the Ice. The river in winter is a liar. From a distance, it looks solid, white and still, a frozen road stretching farther than the eye can see. But up close, it whispers in little groans and shifts under your boots, reminding you that beneath the ice, the current is still alive, cold enough to steal the breath from your lungs in a heartbeat. I'd always told myself I'd never walk it, not with Leo. But that was before Dane showed up in Greyford. Before the market. Before the whispered warning about the South Road. Now the riverbank was our only path. The snow along the bank was soft, our boots sinking to the ankles. It slowed us, but that was fine. Slow meant careful. I kept Leo close enough that I could grab him if he slipped. His small hand clung to mine, glove damp where our fingers met. "Are we going to cross it?" he asked, peering at the glittering stretch ahead. "Not all the way," I said. "We just follow it. It'll take us to a place where the road is safer." He nodded, though I caught the flicker of worry in his eyes. He'd been with me long enough to recognize the signs, the short answers, the way I kept glancing behind us, the way I scanned every patch of shadow along the bank. The wind picked up, tugging at my hood and stinging my cheeks. Overhead, the sky was a heavy gray that promised more snow. That would be both blessing and curse, good for hiding our tracks, bad for visibility. We pressed on. The sound of the river was muffled under its icy skin, a deep, steady thrum. Every few yards, we passed a spot where the ice had buckled, jagged shards poking up like broken glass. I steered Leo wide around them. Hours passed. My legs ached, but I didn't dare stop for long. Each time we paused, I imagined the sound of boots crunching in the snow behind us. Sometimes I thought I caught a faint scent on the wind, a mix of cedar and cold steel, but it was gone before I could be sure. By mid-morning, we reached a bend where the river narrowed. The banks here were steep, the snow deep enough to make climbing slow. The ice near the curve was a pale, translucent blue instead of the cloudy white we'd seen before. "Mama." Leo's voice was small. "Is it safe?" I crouched, pressing my gloved hand to the surface. It felt solid, but the faintest vibration ran through it, like the heartbeat of something sleeping. "We'll stay near the edge," I said, leading him onto the ice. The first few steps were fine. The surface didn't shift. My breath came a little easier. Then came the sound. It wasn't loud, just a deep, hollow crack that echoed through the quiet like a warning. Leo froze, his fingers tightening around mine. "Mama. Don't move." My voice was sharper than I meant, but fear sharpened everything. I scanned the surface. A thin, dark line snaked out from under Leo's boot, spiderwebbing toward the center. Very slowly, I pulled him back toward the bank. Each step made the crack widen. The ice groaned, and the sound vibrated up through my bones. We were 2 steps from the snow when it happened. A section to our right gave way with a splash, water surging up through the hole. I yanked Leo forward, my boots slipping on the slick surface. We stumbled into the snow, both of us gasping. Leo clung to me, trembling. "I don't like the river." "Neither do I said, scanning the bank for a safer route. The problem was, the bank here was too steep to follow. Our only choice was to climb up into the trees and find a path above. I took his hand again, leading him up the incline. The snow was deep, forcing us to wade through drifts up to our knees. My thighs burned, my breath clouding in the cold air. When we finally reached the top, I glanced back. The ice we just crossed looked undisturbed, except for the small holes still rippling with dark water. But farther down the bank, something moved. At first, I thought it was a shadow from the trees. Then the shadow straightened. My pulse stuttered. The figure was too far to make out clearly, but the shape was unmistakable, broad shoulders, a steady stride that ate the ground, even in deep snow. Dane. I turned quickly, pulling Leo along the narrow trail through the trees. We couldn't go back to the river, not with him there. That meant we'd have to take the high ground, cutting across until we could rejoin the bank closer to the ferry crossing. The forest here was dense, branches heavy with snow that dumped down our necks when we brushed against them. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. Every step away from the river muffled the sound of the water, but it didn't muffle the knowledge that Dane was behind us. We moved until my lungs burned, until Leo stumbled and I had to lift him onto my hip. My muscles screamed under his weight, but I kept going. When we finally paused, I pressed him against a tree, both of us catching our breath. "You okay?" He nodded, his face pale but determined. "Are we still going to the ferry?" "Yes," I said, though my voice was quieter now. "But we have to be careful. He's behind us." Leo didn't ask who. He didn't have to. Somewhere through the trees, a faint crack of a branch reached my ears. He was closer than I thought. And the ice ahead wasn't the only thing about to break. Episode 21, The Wolf in the Trees. The forest was quieter than the riverbank, but not in a way that eased my mind. Here, every sound stood out, our boots crunching through snow, the creak of ice-heavy branches, the occasional rattle of a bird startled from its roost. And somewhere behind us, the faint, steady rhythm of someone following. I didn't tell Leo. He didn't need to hear what he already felt. His little hand in mine was tight, his eyes darting to every shadow. The path we'd found wasn't much of a path at all, just a faint depression between drifts where deer or foxes had passed before the snow fell heavier. It wound uphill, forcing us to climb in short, grueling bursts before dropping again into hollows where the cold settled like a living thing. I kept my ears open, straining to pick apart the sounds of the forest from the sound of pursuit. Twice I thought I'd lost him, only to hear that measured tread again, closer than before. Dane wasn't rushing. That was the worst part. He didn't need to. Wolves didn't run their prey down in one burst, they wore them out, step by step, until there was nowhere left to go. By late morning, Leo's pace was flagging. His steps grew shorter, his breath rasping in the frigid air. I scanned the trees ahead and spotted a fallen log half buried in snow. "We'll rest here," I said, crouching beside it. I dug into my satchel, pulling out a strip of dried meat and a small flask of water. Leo ate in silence, watching me over the rim of the flask. "Is he close?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was in the way I kept glancing over my shoulder, the way my fingers wouldn't stop brushing the knife at my belt. "Close enough," I said finally. "But we're not letting him catch us." His jaw set in a way that made my chest ache. It was the same stubborn line I'd seen in the mirror too many times. We didn't rest long. The cold wouldn't let us, and neither would the knowledge that every moment here was a moment Dane closed the gap. The ground leveled out after a while, the trees thinning just enough for pale winter light to seep through. That was when I heard it, not the sound of boots, but the low, deliberate crunch of snow under more weight than a man. I froze, pulling Leo behind me. At first, I thought it might be a deer. But deer didn't move like that. This was slower, more deliberate. The wind shifted, and the scent hit me, pine, leather, and something darker, sharper, that I'd know anywhere. Dane. I tightened my grip on the knife. We couldn't outrun him in open ground. Which meant we needed cover. "See that ridge?" I whispered to Leo, pointing to a rise ahead. "We're going up and over. Once we're on the other side, we stay low and keep moving." He nodded, eyes wide but steady. We moved quickly, the snow grabbing at our boots. I risked a glance back, and saw him. Not just a shadow now. A man in black and gray, broad-shouldered, moving between the trees with the kind of grace that made the world around him seem slow. His gaze was locked on me, amber eyes bright even in the dim light. I didn't look again. We crested the ridge and slid down the far side, the snow deep enough to catch us hard. My knees screamed as I pushed up and grabbed Leo's hand again. We ran. Branches whipped at my face, snow showering down from above. The cold burned my lungs, but the sound behind us was closer now, boots, breaking branches, the hiss of breath drawn through teeth. He was right there. We burst into a small clearing, ringed with pines so heavy with snow their branches formed a low canopy. It was the only shelter in sight. I shoved Leo ahead of me, crouching low under the branches. "Stay down," I told him, my breath visible in the dim space. Through the curtain of green and white, I saw him enter the clearing. He didn't rush. He didn't call my name. He just stood there for a moment, scanning the treeline like a predator deciding which hole the rabbit had taken. Then his head turned, just slightly, and I knew he'd caught my scent. I gripped the knife tighter, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. He took a step toward our hiding place. Then another. The snow above us shifted under the weight of his boots, little drifts falling onto my shoulders. He was close enough now that I could hear the slow drag of his breath. And then, a crack rang out from somewhere deeper in the forest. Sharp, sudden, unmistakable. A gunshot. Dane's head snapped toward the sound. For a heartbeat, he stayed where he was. Then he turned and vanished back into the trees, moving fast toward the noise. I didn't wait to wonder who had fired or why. I grabbed Leo's hand and crawled out from under the pines, heading for the opposite side of the clearing. Whoever had pulled that trigger had bought us time. But time was all they'd bought, and the wolf would be back on our trail soon enough. Episode 22, The Stranger's Shot. The sound of the gunshot still rang in my ears as we ran. It wasn't the kind of sound you could mistake for a branch breaking or ice giving way. It was sharp, metallic, final. Leo stumbled once, nearly dragging me down with him, but I tightened my grip and hauled him upright. We kept moving, weaving between the pines until my legs felt like lead and my lungs burned with every breath. When I finally dared to stop, I pressed my back against the thick trunk of an old spruce, pulling Leo in front of me. "Breathe," I whispered, more for myself than him. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his eyes darting around. "Who was that?" "I don't know." My voice came out lower than I intended. "But we're not going to wait and find out the hard way." Still, I couldn't help glancing back through the trees. No sign of Dane. No movement but the slow fall of snow from the branches. The shot had sent him in the other direction, at least for now. I didn't fool myself into thinking it would keep him away for long. Dane didn't abandon a hunt, not unless he had a very good reason. We pressed on, angling away from where the sound had come. But the forest had a way of twisting on itself in winter, the trees too similar, the light too dim. Before long, I realized we'd looped closer to the source than I meant to. That was when I saw the first sign of someone else. A set of tracks, much larger than mine, fresh in the snow. They cut across our path at a sharp angle, heading deeper into the woods. There was something deliberate about them, long, steady strides that didn't wander like a hunter following game. Leo crouched, peering at them. "Are they his?" I shook my head. "No. His boots are heavier, and he doesn't drag his left foot." I didn't add that whoever these belonged to was moving fast, and in the same direction Dane had gone. We should have turned away right then. But a strange thought anchored my feet. What if whoever fired that shot had done it to help us? It was foolish. Help from strangers in the wild was rare, and it often came with a price. But if someone out there was willing to aim a rifle in Dane's direction, I needed to know who, and why. "Stay close," I told Leo. We followed the tracks, moving as quietly as we could. The wind had picked up again, carrying the scent of wood smoke. That, more than anything, told me we were nearing someone's shelter. Sure enough, after another 15 minutes, the trees thinned, opening into a small clearing. At its center was a low cabin of rough-hewn logs, its roof heavy with snow. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and a faint orange glow flickered through a narrow window. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, pulling Leo behind a fallen log. "Wait here," I whispered. He looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at my face made him swallow the words. I moved low, circling toward the back of the cabin. No movement outside. No sound but the hiss of the wind through the pines. I was 3 steps from the rear wall when a voice cut through the quiet. "You lost." I spun, knife in hand. The man standing behind me was tall, his coat patched but sturdy, a rifle cradled casually in his hands. His face was half hidden by a scarf pulled up to his nose, but his eyes, pale gray, sharp, missed nothing. "Depends on who's asking," I said, keeping my stance ready. He tilted his head, studying me like I was something pinned under glass. "Name's Cole. And I'm guessing you're the one with the wolf on her tail." My grip on the knife tightened. "You saw him." "More than saw." His tone was matter-of-fact, like he was talking about a fox nosing through his traps. "He was closing in on you fast. I figured you wouldn't appreciate that." "You fired the shot." He nodded once. "Not to hit him. Just to slow him down. Didn't think you'd run toward me after." I didn't answer that. My eyes flicked to the rifle. "Why help?" Cole's gaze slid past me toward the trees. Because that wolf's bad news. And because you've got a kid with you. Makes it harder for me to stand by. As if on cue, Leo appeared from behind the log, his cheeks pink from the cold. Mama. Cole's eyes softened, just barely. That him? I stepped aside, motioning Leo over. He hesitated before coming to stand beside me, half hidden by my coat. You've got two choices, Cole said, adjusting the rifle on his shoulder. You keep running, and he'll catch you sooner or later. Or you come inside, warm up, and we figure a way to throw him off your trail. It should have been an easy decision. Warmth, shelter, maybe even a meal. But every instinct I had screamed that trading one danger for another was still a gamble. I don't know you, I said. Don't need to, he replied. Just need to know if you want to keep that boy safe. The wind cut through my coat like a knife. Leo shivered against me. I weighed the risk for another heartbeat. Then I nodded, just once. Cole stepped back, motioning toward the cabin. Then get inside. You've got about 15 minutes before your wolf friend figures out where you went. Episode 23, Fire and Questions. The warmth hit us first. After days of wind, snow, and the damp chill of the forest, stepping into the cabin felt like crossing into another world. The air smelled of pine resin and wood smoke, with an undertone of something faintly metallic, oil for the rifle, maybe. Cole closed the door behind us, sliding a heavy wooden bar across it. The sound made me tense. A locked door could keep danger out, or keep us in. Leo lingered near me, his eyes darting around the single-room space. The cabin was compact but neat, a stone hearth in one corner with a fire snapping cheerfully, a small table and two chairs, shelves lined with jars and tins. A rough-hewn bed stood against the far wall, its blankets folded tight. Sit, Cole said, nodding toward the chairs. You both look half frozen. I didn't move right away. You always keep the place this warm. In winter. Always. Cold gets into your bones if you let it. He set his rifle on a rack by the door and began shrugging out of his coat. I guided Leo to one of the chairs, keeping my knife in hand. He leaned into the fire's glow, his small hands extended toward it. The light painted his cheeks with color again, though his eyes still carried the weary caution I'd seen grow sharper since we left Grayford. Cole caught me watching and nodded toward a pot suspended over the fire. There's stew. Elk and barley. Not fancy, but it'll fill you up. Leo's stomach answered before I could, the sound loud in the quiet room. I saw a flicker of amusement in Cole's pale eyes, but it didn't last long. While he ladled the stew into two mismatched bowls, I moved closer to the fire, my back to the wall so I could see both him and the door. The heat seeped through my coat, loosening the knot between my shoulders a fraction, but not enough to lower my guard. Eat, he said, setting a bowl in front of Leo and another on the table for me. You'll think straighter on a full stomach. I didn't argue. The first spoonful was hot enough to make my eyes sting, the salt and meat rich after too many days of dried rations. Across from me, Leo ate with the single-minded focus only hunger could bring. Cole took the third chair, resting his elbows on his knees. So, he said, you want to tell me why the blood alpha himself is chasing you through the dead of winter? My spoon stilled halfway to my mouth. You know him. He shrugged. Everyone within 100 miles knows him. Knows enough to stay out of his way. But seeing him track a woman and a kid through the backcountry. That's new. I kept my voice even. He's someone I used to know. We don't see eye to eye anymore. Cole leaned back, the chair creaking. That's one way to put it. Most people who don't see eye to eye with him don't get a second chance to run. Leo glanced between us, his spoon slowing. I shot him a small look meant to reassure, though I wasn't sure how much weight it carried anymore. You help everyone who crosses your land, I said, or just the ones with wolves after them? I help the ones who look like they might make it worth my time. And what's your price? His smile was small, humorless. Haven't decided yet. But you'll know when I do. That did nothing to unknot my spine. When the bowls were empty, Cole stood and moved to the shelves. He pulled down a battered map and spread it across the table, pinning the corners with mugs. You were heading toward the ferry crossing, he said. I didn't confirm it, but my silence was answer enough. Won't work, he went on. If he's half as determined as I think, he'll have someone watching it already. You'll walk right into his hands. I studied the map. Then where? There's a canyon here. He tapped a spot north of our current location. Narrow enough that one person could hold it against a dozen. There's a trail down to the river that bypasses the ferry, but it's not easy. In winter, it's worse. I traced the route with my eyes. It would take us deeper into the mountains, farther from any town. Sounds like a dead end if we're wrong. Maybe, Cole said. But it's the only way I see that doesn't end with you in his camp. The fire popped sharply, making Leo jump. Cole's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. That boy yours? Yes. And his? The pause before I answered was too long. Does it matter? It matters to him, Cole said quietly. If I know one thing about the Blood Alpha, it's that he doesn't give up on what he claims. And from the look on his face out there, he's already claimed you both. My hand tightened on the edge of the table. We're not his. Cole studied me for a long moment. You believe that? I'm not sure he does. The wind rattled the shutters, making the firelight dance over the walls. For the first time since stepping into the cabin, I felt colder. Rest here tonight, Cole said finally. You'll need the strength. At first light, I'll take you to the canyon trail. I hesitated. Why help us? Really? He glanced toward the rifle on the wall. Because a long time ago, someone helped me when they shouldn't have. Figured I owed the debt forward. It wasn't the answer I expected. I tucked Leo into the bed that night, wrapping him in the heavy wool blankets. He was asleep in minutes, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up to him. I stayed by the fire, listening to the wind outside, my knife within reach. Cole sat across the room, cleaning his rifle in silence. When I finally closed my eyes, it was to the thought that tomorrow, the wolf would be back on our trail. And the question that kept me awake long after the fire burned low was whether Cole would still be on our side when that happened. Episode 24, Canyon of No Return. The first light of dawn seeped through the cabin shutters, a thin, cold gray that did little to warm the air. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving only a faint red glow among the ashes. I'd been awake for hours, listening to the wind claw at the cabin walls, waiting for Cole's voice to tell us it was time. It came in the form of 3 quiet knocks on the bed frame. Up, he said, already pulling on his coat. We move now if we want to stay ahead of him. Leo stirred under the blankets, rubbing his eyes. It's still dark, he mumbled. It won't be by the time we reach the ridge, Cole replied, handing me a strip of jerky and a small flask. Eat while we walk. I packed quickly, tucking the food away until Leo was ready for it. My fingers lingered on the knife at my belt before I tightened the strap. Whatever lay ahead, I wasn't walking into it unarmed. Outside, the air bit at my skin. Snow had fallen again during the night, a thin layer that muffled our steps but made the path harder to see. Cole led the way, moving with the ease of someone who'd walked these woods for years. The trees grew denser as we climbed, their branches heavy with frost. Our breaths came in soft clouds, vanishing into the morning air. Leo stayed close to me, his small hand gripping mine, but his eyes scanned the forest the way I'd taught him. I didn't know if that made me proud or afraid. We reached the first ridge just as the sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow in pale gold. Cole paused, scanning the slope behind us. His gaze lingered longer than I liked. "Tracks?" I asked. "Not yet," he said, though his tone told me he wasn't convinced it would stay that way. The descent on the far side was steeper, the snow crusted over in places. Twice Leo slipped, and both times Cole caught him with a speed that surprised me. The second time, he crouched to look him in the eye. "Keep your feet under you," he said gently. "Snow will take you down faster than a wolf." Leo nodded, his cheeks flushed with cold and embarrassment. By midday, the forest began to change. The ground dipped into a narrow valley, and the trees thinned enough for us to see the shadow of the canyon walls ahead. They rose like the bones of the earth, sheer and dark against the sky. "That's it," Cole said, pointing. "Once we're inside, there's only one way through. Good for losing a tracker, bad if the tracker gets in ahead of you." The wind funneled between the cliffs, carrying with it an echo that made it hard to tell how far anything was. My steps slowed. Every instinct told me this place could be as much a trap as a refuge. Cole must have read my hesitation. "You've got another option," he said. "Turn back, try your luck in the open woods. But he'll run you down there, and you know it." He was right. I didn't like it, but he was right. We entered the canyon single file, Cole leading, Leo between us. The walls rose higher as we went, shutting out more of the light. The air grew colder, the snow beneath our boots crunching louder in the confined space. About half a mile in, Cole raised a hand, signaling us to stop. He knelt, brushing snow aside to reveal fresh prints, large, deep, and headed the same way we were. "Dane?" I asked, my voice low. Cole shook his head. "Too heavy for him, and too broad in the stride. Could be a bear. Could be something worse. Worse than a bear." His eyes met mine. Things you don't want to meet in a place with no room to run. We moved slower after that, every sound amplified by the canyon walls. Somewhere above, a crow called, the sound ricocheting back and forth until it felt like we were surrounded by them. Halfway through, we reached a bend where the canyon narrowed to barely more than the width of two people. A frozen stream cut through the center, the ice cracked and treacherous. Cole went first, testing each step with the butt of his rifle. I followed with Leo, keeping him close. The ice groaned under our weight, but held. When we reached the other side, Cole stopped again, listening. The wind had shifted, carrying a scent I recognized instantly, pine, leather, and the sharp edge of something that made my pulse jump. "Dane." "He's close," I whispered. Cole's jaw tightened. Then we moved faster. We pushed on, the path twisting and dipping. My legs ached from the climb, my breath burning in my chest. Every step felt like we were walking deeper into a place that didn't want us there. Then, just as the canyon began to widen, we heard it, a long, low howl, rolling over the stone like thunder. Leo froze. "Mama." "I know," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Keep walking." Cole's eyes were on the ridge above us now. "He's not in the canyon," he said. "He's above it." "Can he get down?" "Not unless he finds the pass ahead of us. But if he does, he'll be waiting." The thought made my stomach twist. We reached a small hollow where the canyon wall had crumbled, leaving a shallow cave. Cole motioned us inside. "Rest. Just for a minute." Leo sank onto a rock, his breath coming fast. I leaned against the wall, my knife still in my hand. Cole stood at the entrance, scanning the heights. "If he's smart, he'll try to cut us off. Which means we've got to get through the pass before he does. And if he's already there." Cole looked back at me, his expression unreadable. "Then we find out how badly he wants you alive." Episode 26, Blood on the Snow. The man blocking the pass didn't move. Snow swirled around him in the wind, catching in his dark hair and clinging to the rough wool of his coat. His amber eyes, so much like Dane's, locked onto mine, sharp and cold, but with an unnerving steadiness, as though he had all the time in the world. Leo's grip on my hand tightened until my fingers ached. I could feel his pulse racing, and mine matched it beat for beat. "Step aside," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He tilted his head, studying me. "I can't do that." The sound of fighting behind us grew sharper, boots grinding on ice, a grunt of effort, the low snarl of a wolf barely holding his shape. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Cole and Dane were locked in a brutal struggle, each move calculated and efficient, the kind of violence that came from long practice. Cole fought with a hunter's precision, every blow aimed to disable. Dane fought like a storm, relentless, unyielding, the sheer force of him enough to make the air seem thinner. When I looked back, the stranger was closer. He hadn't made a sound as he moved. "You're his," he said simply. "I'm no one's," I snapped. He almost smiled at that. That's not what he believes. Leo stepped half behind me, his breath warm against my back. "Mama." "Stay behind me," I murmured, not taking my eyes off the man. He let his gaze drop briefly to Leo, and something flickered there, recognition, maybe, or surprise. But it was gone before I could read it. "You're coming with me," he said, his tone calm, as though the matter was already decided. I shifted my weight, my free hand brushing the hilt of my knife. "You can try." The wind cut between us, carrying the sharp tang of blood. I couldn't tell whose it was, Cole's or Dane's. The thought twisted my gut. The man moved first, stepping forward in a blur. I drew my knife and slashed upward, catching the edge of his sleeve. The fabric tore, but he didn't flinch. He caught my wrist in one hand, his grip iron strong. I twisted, trying to break free, and felt the cold bite of steel against my ribs, his knife, drawn so fast I hadn't even seen it. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "Then don't," I shot back. Behind us, the fight reached a crescendo, a sharp crack, then the heavy thud of a body hitting the snow. The stranger's eyes flicked past me, toward the sound. That single moment of distraction was all I needed. I drove my knee upward, hard. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough for me to wrench free. I shoved Leo toward the side of the pass where the rock face jutted out in a small alcove. "Stay there," I ordered. The man recovered quickly, stepping between me and the open path. His knife glinted in the weak winter light. From the corner of my eye, I saw Cole stagger into view, blood streaking the side of his face. Dane followed, his breathing hard but steady, his amber eyes burning brighter than the stranger's. For one suspended heartbeat, all four of us stood in the narrow pass, the only sounds the wind and the faint trickle of meltwater beneath the ice. "Brother," Dane said to the stranger. "Brother." The word hit harder than I expected. "She's coming with me," the man, Dane's brother, said evenly. Dane's expression didn't change, but the air between them shifted, tense enough to crack stone. "No. She's mine." Cole stepped forward, positioning himself so he was almost in front of me, rifle raised again despite the blood dripping from his brow. "Neither of you is taking her anywhere." The brother's gaze slid to him. "You're bleeding. You won't make it." "I've made it through worse," Cole said. The moment stretched, brittle as ice. Then Dane moved, not toward me, but toward his brother. Their exchange was wordless, carried in glances and the slight shifts of their stances. I could feel the history between them, heavy and complicated, pressing into the cold air. "Get out of the way, Rowan," Dane said at last. "Rowan." Rowan's jaw tightened. "She's safer with me." "She's mine," Dane repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the edge in his voice. I felt Cole tense, his finger tightening on the trigger. The next few seconds fractured into chaos. Rowan lunged, not at Dane, but at me. Cole fired, the shot deafening in the confined space. Dane moved faster than I could track, slamming into his brother and sending them both into the snow. I grabbed Leo and ran. Not far, just enough to put the fight behind us and the curve of the pass ahead. The wind roared through the gap, carrying the sounds of another struggle, shorter this time, more savage. Then silence. Cole appeared first, his face grim. "Move," he said. I didn't ask about the brothers. Not yet. We pushed through the rest of the pass, the wind clawing at us until we broke into the open. Only then did I glance back. Two figures stood in the shadow of the pass entrance, one tall and rigid, the other slightly hunched. I couldn't tell which was which, not from this distance. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Not even close. Episode 27, Shadows in the Pines. The wind died the moment we left the mouth of the pass, as if the mountains themselves had been holding their breath and now finally let it go. Ahead stretched a forest of tall pines, their trunks black against the pale snow, branches heavy and drooping. The air here was still, muffled, but not peaceful. It felt like the silence you get right before a storm. Cole didn't slow his pace. "We keep moving. No straight lines. We'll weave through the trees until we find higher ground." I tightened my hold on Leo's hand. His small boots crunched in the snow, but his breathing was steady now, almost calm. He'd seen more in the last 2 days than any child should. I didn't know if that made him stronger or just more used to danger. "Cole," I said, keeping my voice low, "back there." Later, he cut in, his tone clipped. "Talking slows you down." I bit back a retort. He was right. But the image of those two figures, Dane and Rowan, standing at the mouth of the pass was burned into my mind. The trees closed in around us, their shadows long and sharp. Snow clung to the needles, and every so often, a clump would fall, hitting the ground with a muted whump. It felt like the forest was watching us, holding its breath along with the sky. We moved in silence for nearly an hour, winding between trunks, doubling back, crossing our own tracks to throw off any pursuit. Cole's instincts were sharp, he seemed to sense danger before it made a sound. But eventually, he stopped dead. Leo bumped into my side, looking up in confusion. "Why'd we stop?" Cole crouched, brushing the snow away to reveal a fresh print, deep, wide, and unmistakable. "Wolf." "Not Dane," Cole murmured, studying the edges of the track. "Too broad. Too heavy." "Rowan," I guessed. Cole didn't answer, which was answer enough. I glanced over my shoulder, the dark columns of pine stretching endlessly behind us. No movement, no sound. But that didn't mean we were alone. "Faster," Cole said, rising to his feet. "We'll cut toward the ridge. If they're tracking us from both sides, we need higher ground to see them coming." We veered uphill, the snow deepening as we climbed. My legs burned, but I forced myself to keep pace. Every step was a reminder of how far I'd run, how far I still had to go. When we reached the crest, Cole signaled for us to crouch. From here, I could see the forest floor below, a vast expanse of snow and shadow. Movement. Two shapes, dark against the white. Not wolves. Men. Even from this distance, I knew the taller one was Dane. The way he moved, purposeful, unhurried, set my teeth on edge. The second figure, Rowan, was a step behind, his posture different now, less the calm predator, more the hunter wary of his companion. "They're not fighting anymore," I murmured. Cole's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean they're on the same side." We didn't wait to find out. Cole led us along the ridge, keeping low, weaving between trees. Every so often, he'd stop to listen, and I could hear it too, the faint crunch of snow far below, keeping pace. By the time the sun began to sink, painting the snow in cold gold, we'd reached a shallow basin ringed with trees. Cole deemed it safe enough to stop for a short rest. Leo collapsed onto a fallen log, pulling his knees to his chest. "Are they going to catch us?" he asked quietly. "Not if we keep ahead," I said, kneeling in front of him. I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "We're not stopping for long." Cole was already scanning the perimeter. "We'll move again when it's darker. Less light means harder tracking." That was when I heard it, a low, drawn-out howl. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough for comfort. Cole's head snapped toward the sound. "Not Dane," he muttered. "Not Rowan either. A third player." My stomach twisted. Who? Could be one of his pack. Could be another pack entirely, Cole said. Either way, it means trouble. The shadows lengthened quickly as the sun dropped, the forest taking on a strange, bluish cast. We moved again, quieter now, every step deliberate. The snow seemed louder underfoot, each crunch a betrayal. At one point, I caught sight of movement between the trees, just a flash of pale fur. Not Dane. Not Rowan. Bigger. Cole saw it too. His hand went to the knife at his belt. "Keep moving," he whispered. We broke into a small clearing just as the first flakes of new snow began to fall. The air smelled different, cleaner, sharper. That's when Dane stepped out from behind a tree. He wasn't running. He wasn't even breathing hard. He just stood there, blocking our path, his amber eyes locked on me. Behind him, Rowan emerged from the shadows, his own gaze flicking to Leo before settling on me. "Enough running," Dane said. "Move," Cole growled, positioning himself between us. Rowan's expression was unreadable. "She doesn't need to go with him," he said quietly. "Come with me instead." Dane's head turned slightly, his jaw tightening. "Stay out of this, Rowan." I looked from one to the other, my pulse pounding. "Why? Why does it matter who I go with?" "Because you're not safe with him," Rowan said, jerking his chin toward Dane. "And she's safe with you?" Cole demanded. Rowan didn't answer directly. His gaze dropped to Leo again, and this time I saw it, the recognition. "I know who he is," Rowan said softly. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Dane's growl was low, dangerous. "Don't." But Rowan's eyes stayed on me. "He's not just your son, Violet. He's..." A sharp crack cut him off. Cole's rifle, fired into the air. "Both of you, back off," Cole snapped. Snow drifted between us, settling on shoulders and hair, turning the clearing into a frozen tableau. No one moved. No one breathed. Somewhere in the distance, the howl came again, closer now. And in that moment, I realized the real danger wasn't Dane or Rowan. It was whatever was hunting all of us from the shadows of the pines. Episode 28, The Third Howl. The second howl rolled through the trees like a slow wave, deeper and closer than before. It wasn't just sound, it was weight, pressing into my chest, making the fine hairs at the back of my neck stand on end. Everyone froze. Dane's head turned slightly toward the sound, nostrils flaring. Rowan's gaze swept the tree line, his fingers flexing at his sides. Cole's grip on his rifle tightened, the barrel lowering just enough to pivot toward the shadows. Leo clung to my leg, his small fingers digging into the fabric of my coat. His breathing was shallow but even, almost too calm, as if he knew something the rest of us didn't. "That's not one of mine," Dane said, his voice low. Rowan shot him a sharp look. "Then you know who it is." Dane didn't answer. That alone told me enough. It was someone dangerous, someone both brothers had reason to fear. The wind shifted, carrying with it a scent I couldn't place, metallic, sharp, almost like burnt wood. It prickled in my nose, unfamiliar and unsettling. Cole stepped half a pace forward. We move. Now. No, Dane said immediately. If we run blind, we'll lead them straight to us. We? Cole's voice was edged with disbelief. You mean to her? Rowan's attention was fixed on the trilene. They're circling. Who are they? I demanded, my voice cracking the silence. And why are they after us? Neither brother answered. Instead, the third howl came, this time from the opposite direction. My heart lurched. They were flanking us. Cole muttered something under his breath and shifted his stance. Violet, take Leo. Stay behind me. No, Dane said again, his tone cutting like a blade. You can't protect them from this. Not alone. And you can. Cole shot back. Dane's eyes flicked to me, then to Leo. Yes. Before Cole could reply, a shadow detached itself from the trees on our left. It was a wolf, bigger than any I'd ever seen, its fur a mottled gray-black, eyes glowing an eerie pale blue. It didn't move right away. It just stood there, watching us, its breath steaming in the frigid air. Then another appeared on our right. And another behind it. 3 of them now, silent, deliberate, their paws barely disturbing the snow. Scouts, Rowan said under his breath. My voice was tight. Scouts for what? For the rest of the pack, Dane answered grimly. The lead wolf took a step forward, its gaze locking on Leo. My stomach twisted. Rowan moved without warning, stepping between the wolf and my son. You don't touch him. The wolf's lip curled, revealing teeth white as bone. Cole raised his rifle, but Dane's hand shot out, gripping the barrel. Don't. Not yet. You shoot, and they'll all come at once. Then what's your plan? Cole demanded. Dane's answer was slow, deliberate. We hold here until we know where the rest are. Leo shifted against me, his voice so quiet I almost didn't catch it. Mama, they smell wrong. I glanced down at him. What do you mean? They're not like him, he whispered, tilting his head toward Dane. Rowan's eyes flicked to the boy, sharp and intent. He can tell the difference. Dane's gaze snapped to his brother, a warning in every line of his body. Don't. But Rowan ignored him, his voice low and steady. It's because he's not fully human. Not fully wolf either. The words hit me like a blow. What? Rowan's expression didn't change. You've wondered why he's faster, why his senses are sharper than other children. It's because. Dane's growl cut through the air. Shut your mouth. He's an alpha's blood, Rowan finished, his eyes on me. And not just any alphas. He's yours, Dane. You know it. The clearing seemed to shrink around us. My ears rang, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and the sick certainty that part of me had always known. Dane didn't deny it. Before I could speak, the third howl came again, so close now it vibrated in my bones. The wolves moved, fanning out to encircle us. Cole swung his rifle toward the nearest, his stance rigid. We can stand here arguing about who belongs to who, or we cannot die. Dane stepped forward, his voice low but carrying. If they want the boy, they go through me. Rowan's gaze cut to him. Through us. And just like that, the 2 brothers were side by side, facing the advancing wolves. Cole glanced over his shoulder at me. When we move, you run. You don't stop. Understand? I nodded, my grip tightening on Leo's hand. The first wolf lunged. Dane met it mid-air, shifting faster than my eyes could follow, his body snapping into the massive, dark form of his wolf. Rowan shifted a heartbeat later, his fur a lighter shade, his movements precise and deadly. Cole fired, the shot cracking through the clearing. Snow exploded where the bullet hit, scattering the wolves just enough to break their circle. Now! Cole barked. I ran, Leo's hand small and strong in mine, the sounds of snarls and snapping jaws chasing us into the dark tangle of pines. Behind us, the fight roared on, 2 wolves against many, the air thick with the scent of blood and the echo of a truth I could no longer unhear. Leo wasn't just my son. He was Dane's. And the whole forest seemed to know it. Episode 29, Blood and Pines. Snow stung my cheeks as we crashed through the pines, branches whipping against my arms. Leo's small hand was in mine, and I held him as though he might vanish into the dark if I let go for even a heartbeat. Behind us, the sounds of battle bled into the forest, snarls, the sharp crack of Cole's rifle, the sickening thud of bodies colliding. Every sound carried in the cold night air, echoing through the trees until I couldn't tell how far away the fight really was. Keep running, Cole barked, just ahead of us. He moved like a man who knew the land better than his own body, never hesitating, never faltering, even as blood streaked down his temple from an earlier blow. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I didn't stop. Finally, Cole veered into a hollow between 2 massive pines. The snow was deeper here, the ground uneven, but the thick branches overhead created a canopy that blocked out most of the sky. A temporary shelter. Here, he said, gesturing sharply. Catch your breath. Just for a moment. I collapsed against the trunk, pulling Leo close. He pressed his face into my shoulder, trembling, though his voice was steady when he whispered, "Mama, they wanted me." My heart clenched. I know, baby. I won't let them. Cole crouched at the edge of the hollow, rifle trained outward, eyes scanning the shadows. His whole body was coiled tight, every muscle ready. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Slowly, the sounds of the fight grew fainter, swallowed by the forest. Then came the silence. The kind of silence that wasn't peace, but aftermath. Cole didn't relax. If anything, he tensed further. They'll follow, he muttered. Wolves don't give up easy once they've chosen prey. I wanted to ask him what kind of wolves those were, but the words died on my lips as the underbrush rustled. A shape emerged from the trees, massive and dark, snow clinging to its fur. Dane. He padded into the hollow, his wolf form streaked with blood, some his own, most not. His chest heaved with each breath, but his eyes glowed fierce and alive. Behind him, Rowan appeared, shifting back into his human form as he stepped into the light. His face was grim, a fresh gash running down his arm. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the drip of blood hitting snow. Then Dane shifted back, towering over us, his body still taut with fight. His gaze found me instantly. "You shouldn't have run," he said, his voice rough. I bristled, tightening my arms around Leo. What was I supposed to do? Sit there while those things tore us apart? I would have stopped them. You weren't stopping them, I snapped. You were fighting for your life. His jaw clenched. The muscle there ticked, but he didn't argue. Rowan sank against a tree, his hand pressed to his wound. He's right, Violet. If those weren't scouts, we'd all be dead. But you need to understand, they weren't hunting you. Not exactly. Then who? I demanded. Rowan's eyes shifted to Leo. My stomach dropped. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Yes, Rowan said evenly. They wanted the boy. Dane's growl was immediate, low and dangerous. Enough. Rowan ignored him, his gaze steady on me. Because he's not just your son. He's. Don't. Dane's voice cracked like thunder. But I was done being left in the dark. Tell me, I demanded, my voice shaking. Tell me the truth. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire between them burned hotter than the cold air around us, a silent war of wills. Then Rowan said, he's alpha blood. I felt Leo stiffen in my arms, but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Dane stepped forward, towering, his amber eyes locked on me. He's mine. The world tilted. My ears rang. 1,000 memories crashed through me, nights I'd tried to forget, the way I'd carried Leo alone, the shame, the exile. And through it all, a part of me had known. But hearing him say it. My throat worked, but no sound came out. Dane's gaze softened, just barely. I didn't know. Not until tonight. That's a lie, I spat, finding my voice again. You denied me. You denied him. You left me to do this alone. His eyes darkened. I didn't know he existed. He has your eyes. I snapped, my voice breaking. How could you not know? Dane flinched, just slightly, as if my words were claws. Rowan spoke into the silence, his voice cutting through. It doesn't matter what you two argue about. What matters is that others know now. And they will come for him. Because a child like that. Stop. Dane's voice was steel. You don't say it. Rowan's gaze didn't waver. A child like that changes everything. The air thickened, heavy with meaning I didn't want to understand. Cole, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. If what he says is true, then this boy is a target for every pack within 100 miles. You think you're hunted now? It'll get worse. My arms tightened around Leo. He looked up at me, his amber-flecked eyes wide and searching. Mama, is it true? Tears stung my eyes. You're mine, I whispered fiercely. That's all that matters. But even as I said it, I felt the ground shifting beneath us. Because if Leo was Dane's son, if he was alpha blood, then nothing would ever be simple again. The night pressed close around us, the forest whispering with unseen movement. The danger wasn't gone, it was only waiting. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if Dane was my protector, or another kind of threat entirely. Episode 30, The Claim. The forest was too quiet. Not the natural hush of snow settling on pine branches, but a silence that carried weight, like the moment before an avalanche, when the whole mountain seems to hold its breath. I sat with Leo curled against me, his small body warm even through the layers of fur and wool. My mind churned with the words still echoing in my ears, he's mine. Dane's. The father of my child stood only a few paces away, blood streaking his jaw, amber eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Rowan leaned against a tree, watching us all with the unsettling calm of someone who saw 2 moves further on the board. Cole stood guard at the hollow's edge, rifle raised, his jaw set hard enough to crack. Then the silence broke. Not with a howl this time, but with many. Dozens. The sound tore through the night, overlapping, rising, a chorus of hunger and rage. Cole swore under his breath. They brought the whole damn pack. Dane's eyes flicked to me, then to Leo. Stay behind me. No, I snapped. You don't get to order me. He didn't flinch. You want him safe. Then do as I say. The underbrush exploded. Wolves surged into the clearing, larger than any normal wolves, their eyes glowing with that unnatural pale blue. Their bodies moved with terrifying coordination, circling us, snapping their jaws in unison. Cole fired the first shot, dropping one mid-lunge. The pack scattered, regrouped, then rushed again. Dane shifted in a heartbeat, his wolf form colliding with 2 at once, tearing into them with a ferocity that left the snow sprayed crimson. Rowan shifted a beat later, his lighter wolf darting between shadows, precise and lethal. Cole stood his ground, firing again and again, every shot buying us a breath. I clutched Leo and pressed us against the tree, heart hammering. He buried his face in my coat, but I could feel the tension in his small body. He wasn't just afraid, he was aware. The wolves wanted him. Through the chaos, Dane fought like a creature possessed, every movement driven by more than survival. He wasn't just fighting the enemy, he was fighting for us. For Leo. And for the first time, I wondered if his words had been true. The battle blurred, snow, blood, snarls, gunfire. But then, suddenly, there was a break. The wolves pulled back, circling, panting, watching. Their leader stepped forward. He was massive, nearly twice Dane's size, his fur silver-streaked with black, eyes glowing brighter than the rest. His presence was suffocating, every step deliberate, confident. Dane growled low, his body coiled to strike. But the silver wolf didn't attack. He stopped, staring at Leo. Something passed between them, a recognition. My son's breath hitched, and his small hand gripped my sleeve tighter. "Mama," he whispered. "He knows me." A chill ran through me. Rowan shifted back to human form, blood dripping from his arm. "That's no ordinary alpha. That's a warlord. And he didn't come for us." His gaze cut to Leo. "He came for him." Over my dead body, Dane snarled, half-shifted, his voice distorted by his wolf form. The silver wolf threw back his head and howled, and the pack answered as one. The sound shook the clearing, rattling through my bones. Cole muttered, "We can't hold this." "Not all of them." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "There's another way." "What way?" I demanded. He looked straight at me. "Give him the boy." The world stopped. My arms tightened around Leo instinctively, my throat locking. "Never." Rowan's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Think, Violet. If they want him alive, then he's safer with them than with us. And if you go with him..." Dane's roar cut him off, shaking the trees. "You would hand my son over to them. You traitor." Rowan didn't blink. "Better alive in their hands than dead in yours." The words struck harder than claws. Cole swung his rifle toward Rowan. "Say that again, and I'll put you down before they do." The brothers stood locked in fury, and in the middle of it all, I held Leo, trembling but silent, his amber-flecked eyes staring at the silver wolf. And then he did something I will never forget. He stepped out of my arms. "Leo!" I cried, reaching for him, but he shook his head. The silver wolf lowered itself, not aggressive, almost reverent. Leo's small voice carried across the clearing. "I'm not yours." He pointed a finger, steady despite his size. "I'm his." And he turned to Dane. The silver wolf froze. The pack shifted uneasily, their growls dying into silence. Dane, still half-wolf, stared at his son with something raw and unguarded. "Leo." The boy's eyes, so much like his father's, blazed with defiance. "You can't take me. I already belong." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The forest itself seemed to wait. Then the silver wolf snarled, breaking the fragile stillness, and the pack surged again. Dane lunged forward, his roar echoing, meeting the enemy head-on. Cole fired into the fray. Rowan vanished into the shadows, whether to fight or flee, I couldn't tell. I grabbed Leo back into my arms, shielding him as chaos erupted around us once more. And through it all, one truth burned in my mind, searing and undeniable. My son had chosen. But what that choice meant, for him, for me, for all of us, was a question that would only be answered in blood.